Hello, and welcome back to the Access Vikings podcast. My name is Emily Leiker. I'm joined by my Minnesota Star Tribune colleagues Ben Goessling and Andrew Krammer. We are at TCO Performance Center in Eagan, and we are still here chatting about the Vikings, even though it feels like there is increasingly less to cover, or at least more becomes rehash than new information. There's a little bit of new information this week that we will go ahead and talk about here at the top. The breaking news at this week's Monday press conference with Kevin O'Connell was that Adam Thielen had requested a release last week and was granted that release by the Vikings. They waived him, and he has since been picked up off the waiver wire by the Steelers, meaning that he is going to play with Aaron Rodgers. Ben, it sounds like the two of them have some history.
They do. They've been friends for the last few years. Actually, that golf tournament, the American Century Championship, the big celebrity golf thing in Lake Tahoe, they've played together in that a number of times over the years. I think it was, if I remember right, it was Rodgers, Thielen, Steph Curry, and somebody else. And I think that group has changed a little bit at times, but I know Steph Curry was definitely in that group. But they've become good friends through the course of playing in that thing. Thielen, of course, was a big golfer growing up at Detroit Lakes High School, where Star Tribune has learned he is from. Won a state golf championship, I believe, as a senior there. So he's a big golfer. They've played together a lot in this thing, gotten to know each other. They have talked a lot over the years about playing together. So I actually heard earlier this week that when Thielen asked for his release, this was the hope that, I mean, he was going to go through waivers because it's after the trade deadline, but this was the hope for him, is a chance to play with Rodgers. They've talked about this over the years. In fact, even back in 2022, when the Vikings very briefly thought about blowing it up, they would have been trading Cousins. We've talked about this over the years, possibly to the Colts that year. There was a discussion about if they would release Thielen that season, and Thielen was very much, if that were going to happen, interested in going to play with Rodgers. So he may have ended up in Green Bay at that point, but this idea of the possibility of them playing together has been on their minds for a while, and this was very much something he wanted to do. Probably the end of Adam Thielen's career, quite possibly the end of Aaron Rodgers' career, and the Steelers are tied for first in the AFC North with 2 games left against the Ravens. So chance for Adam Thielen possibly to get to the playoffs, but a lot of this was wanting to play with Rodgers, obviously wanting to play somewhere where he feels like he could get a few more opportunities, and Aaron Rodgers has had some things to say about his current receivers lately, so maybe it's a chance to bring in somebody that he feels will do what he's supposed to do on a certain play more often than he seems to think his current receivers are doing.
Aaron's pointing the finger? What?
Yeah, shocking, I know.
No.
I know.
Well, what a turn of events for Adam to be so hyped on his Instagram video, his family when he was in Carolina. They get traded here. Ben, you wrote about how it was just, that was one of the many failed kind of decisions this Vikings front office for this year has made.
Yeah, I mean, that move, if we remember, came because Justin Jefferson had been out for most of training camp with that hamstring, and Jordan Addison, of course, was starting his 3-week suspension. They felt like Jalen Nailor was going to play a role, but Jalen Nailor was coming out of training camp with an injury too, and then Ty Felton, the third-round pick, just was not ready to be involved in the offense. In fact, hasn't really been involved in the offense much at all. He's caught 1 pass this season. So they've had a number of these spots where you bring in a veteran like Adam Thielen. Ends up being about the equivalent of a mid-6th round pick in terms of the pick swaps they did. Like pick 213, I think, is where Over the Caps chart puts it. It was the equivalent of that. And then the money, of course, is pretty big for a guy that, caught, what was it? I mean, he played
8 passes. Dropped 3 of them.
18 targets, I think,
Yeah.
for the year. So the cost is high, but a lot of this has been, Kevin O'Connell alluded to it today, when the depth has not been there, and the depth is not cheap because the drafts have not hit. You have to go get guys like Thielen. You get defensive tackles like Allen and Hargrave, who are expensive, and they're going to have a lot of decisions to make on those types of players. This will not be the last veteran decision they have to make between now and March.
Well, and quickly, we should mention, you bring up Green Bay. Does this make it any more palatable, Adam's exit, when he had a possibility of going to Green Bay a few years ago? I'm sure Vikings fans would not have liked that.
They would not have liked that at the time.
So is this any more palatable, going to Aaron Rodgers in Pittsburgh, I guess?
It's probably. I mean, it's
yeah.
not the Packers, I guess, so there's always that.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you would see him go and, if the Packers, if Aaron Rodgers was there and the Packers were trying to make a run, I mean, it's that whole thing of seeing the guy in another uniform. That's a big thing, obviously. So he'll do it with the Steelers we'll see where this goes. But yeah, the sting is probably a little less than that might have been had that happened. And I don't think that scenario got like super close. Obviously, the Vikings decided not to blow anything up in 22, and they kept the band together. But yes, the crux of this is the Thielen-Rodgers relationship has been something they've talked about kind of bringing together on the field for a while, and they'll get a chance to do that at least for a few weeks, maybe a little more depending on if they make the playoffs.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, part of this you kind of mentioned in there is that Adam said in his statement about this that he has known since the spring that this is going to be his final NFL season. That was not revealed to the media or anyone beforehand. It wasn't like that was something known when he was coming in here. And I thought it was interesting. Kevin O'Connell said something when he was talking about this the other day, like along the lines of if that's even set in stone or something. Mm-hmm. So I think it'll be interesting to see what the decision is for Thielen at the end of this season, and if it does, in fact, like he hangs up the cleats, or if he says, I don't know, let's run it back one more time.
Well, I think a lot of the consideration for him on this has been where was he going to be? If he was going to be in Carolina, I think some of the thought process is, I want to be back home. I want my kids to grow up in Minnesota. Obviously, that's where he's going to retire. So when he came here, at least my understanding of it was, if the Vikings wanted to keep going with something, maybe that's the way this works out, because you're able to be in Minnesota, your kids are in a stable spot, and this, veteran players, this becomes part of the equation of, do I want to keep bouncing around and having my kids change schools in the middle of the year, and just the instability that comes into it when you have a family, and he's got 3 kids now, so that becomes part of the thought process. I think if the opportunity was there to play with the Vikings again in 26, that's probably something he would have been a little more interested in doing. I don't think that it's going to be something that's on the table at this point. So I would imagine this is it, and then he does the ceremonial one-day contract to retire here and does the press conference, which he said when he came back. Yeah. I thought that was going to be the next time I see you guys. Yeah. And then obviously had the run here. It turns out it didn't pan out to be what they thought it was going to be when they made the trade, and probably what he thought it was going to be.
Yeah, and Emily, it does make for a nice sounding, reason for why he would ask for his release from a team. He had said, I think when he wrote his post that he shared on social media, he said, this is not easy for me to do, or some variation of that. Obviously, this wasn't easy, but it speaks to where this team is, doesn't it? 4-8 with where they're currently at with J.J. McCarthy, with what Adam thought he might be joining this year versus what it ended up being in December.
Well, and Adam just really hasn't played that big of a role, and there's like a number of factors that go into that since Addison returned from his suspension. One that's kept popping up this week is that Jefferson, Addison, and Naylor have been healthy all season.
Yep.
They are that's the wide receiver group is, I think, probably it is the only position group on the offense that has been healthy all year. I think every other position has had at least one in-season injury. There's been that. There is, Kevin O'Connell mentioned, obviously, the decrease in the average number of plays. Like, there are just fewer snaps that this offense is having in a game. So Adam really hadn't been asked to do too much in the past few weeks, too. And I think that was the other part that came up in some of these statements and commentary on this, was he wants to go and actually have a chance at playing. And in Pittsburgh, he is going to be the most veteran guy in that room by 5 seasons, I think, over DK Metcalf. So, yes, I think he will see probably a little bit more time there working with Rodgers.
Well, and I think it's the thing where, this is going to be probably, 5 weeks, maybe 6 if they make the playoffs, if they play a playoff game. You're not talking about a lot of time. It does become a question if you're looking at it from this perspective. If this is sort of your last fling in the NFL, do you want to spend the last weeks of that with a young quarterback for a team that doesn't really have a lot of chance to make the playoffs? It would take a 5-game win streak and a lot of help for them to get in. So it probably does become a little more when it's this black and white, I guess, in terms of this is going to be it for me, probably. How do you want to spend those last weeks in the NFL? Do you want to do it, languishing behind receivers and for a team that has to have a lot of patience? Yeah. This is always the question with veteran players and a young quarterback. And when it becomes a matter of, okay, 5 weeks, it's not that big of a deal. Maybe you just, it is a window into saying, okay, yeah, I'd probably rather spend this time in a little different situation than what I'm going to have here.
Yeah, and 5 more weeks of listening to a coaching staff and players talk about how they can get more out of their passing game. Yeah. A passing game that Adam was not asked to be much of a part of, and one that when he was, we mentioned the drops, compared to the catches, he wasn't really contributing a whole lot. But what we heard today from Kevin O'Connell, I thought was really interesting in terms of the young quarterback and what they want to see moving forward. They're opening to simplifying everything from the game plan, the volume, how big it's going to be going into the game versus the concepts they're putting in across different personnel formations, how varied they're going to get with their personnel formations, all the way down to simplifying what they want J.J. McCarthy focusing on, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin O'Connell said today, basically, there's been a lot of talk about his mechanics and his footwork, and he's been asked about it a lot, as he said today, but he's also brought it up a lot on his own, where it's invited those extra questions about it at times. For however we got there, he kind of said today, I'm done thinking about that. And maybe some of that is, it's either maybe I've been a little too focused on that, and it's probably clouded his mind a little bit. I mean, maybe he's pulling back from that, or he's just saying, kid, we've talked about this enough. It needs to get displayed on the field, and you need to just go play. So however we got here, it does seem like there's a little bit of just, hey, grip it and rip it a little more. I mean, we've used golf analogies at times, but I think about this. I remember I was saying this in the media room. I was a kid growing up in the late 90s, started playing golf in high school on the heels of the Tiger Woods. I was one of those kids that, Tiger made it cool, let's go out and try. And I was not good. But I would read like Golf Magazine, and every month there's a different instructor that has a different swing thought. So you start thinking about, okay, I need to do this with my hips. I need to do this with my hands. I need to do this with my front shoulder. And you stand over the ball with like 5 things in your head, and your brain can only hold one cue at a time. So you're like, okay, I got to do all this. And then everything just becomes disjointed, and you spray it. So it's just like, no, just take it back and hit it. Don't overthink it. It seems like there's a little bit of that in the process here.
Yeah, he said, I don't want him overthinking.
Yeah.
And that's all part of it. And we can just see it when he talks, right? JJ's very much an overthinker.
Right. I was going to say, we've talked about it dating back to this preseason. I'm sure you guys were talking about it when he got drafted last year. Like, he is a very cerebral guy in that I think he just thinks a lot about everything. Everything he's doing, everything he's saying, everything that's going on around him, everything he can do to get better. And so now, as they kind of reach this point in the season where it's like, we just kind of have to make it through each week. It's let's turn off as much as we can to just get you, like, here's the on-off switch, like, get the ball out. And it'll be interesting to see what that looks like against this Commanders team, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. Couple injury updates. Ty Chandler is going to make his return to the practice field today. Kevin O'Connell announced that they're opening his 21-day practice window. He was injured in that season opener on an opening kickoff and then played through the game, if you guys remember Matt Daniels telling us that. So he will be back out there. That obviously comes as Aaron Jones is dealing with kind of a re-aggravation of his AC joint sprain. We'll see if he's out there later today. And then the other big injury news, we're talking pre-practice, so we haven't gotten the practice report or anything yet, but Donovan Jackson, as of Wednesday, is not yet ready to go yet.
Yeah, Kevin O'Connell said he's just not at a point where he can practice quite yet. They'll see how it shakes out through the week. But it didn't sound terribly optimistic today, at least, that they would have him Sunday. We'll see how that goes. But when you're starting the week and it's still this spot of, he's not ready to practice, that's not generally a good sign on a Wednesday for his chances to go. We'll see about Christian Darrisaw for Sunday. It seems like there'd probably be a better chance of that. Kevin O'Connell said on Sunday that he was close to being able to play. But, they need a decent offensive front for J.J. McCarthy to work behind.
Yeah, the good news is it sounds like Ryan Kelly should be fine back on Monday.
Yeah.
He had mentioned that hip flexor that knocked him out of the game didn't look like too big of an issue. And then, you mentioned Darrisaw. I think he did say today that, like I said, Monday should be a normal work week for him. And then he kind of let slip, or maybe wanted to put out there that into playing on Sunday, Darrisaw should be.
Yeah.
So we'll see about it. We've seen with Christian, things can be questionable going into the weekend with the knee, because they've mentioned, too, that knee injury is still absolutely a factor for Christian in terms of playing. But when Justin School's out there, it looks a lot different, even if you're going against Washington's defense, which we know is not very good.
Yes, let's get into Washington a little bit, but let's start on the quarterback side. Obviously, this is the third 2024 QB that they faced this year.
Williams,
or seen.
I mean, if you throw joint practices.
Penix,
Yeah.
I guess, yeah.
Williams,
Penix, and now
Daniels, and then,
Okay,
3.5, I guess, or something. We can throw Drake May in from the joint practices.
Yeah. So there's still the potential that Jaden Daniels plays. The Commanders have not made a ruling on that. I was listening to Dan Quinn's Wednesday press conference before we came in here, and he said he's optimistic that he's going to get practice time this week, but similar to how we heard Kevin O'Connell talk about JJ clearing concussion protocol last week, Dan Quinn's point was some of the functional contact that you get as a quarterback in game, you don't have a way of simulating in practice. So they kind of have to go out of their way. He's dealing with a dislocated left elbow. That's what he's coming back from right now. They have to work through what are stiff arms going to feel like for him and all of that stuff. But it's either going to be Jaden Daniels or Marcus Mariota. Let's start and stick with Jaden Daniels. I'm curious, how interested were the Vikings in Jaden Daniels last year during this draft class?
I would have to imagine a lot.
Yeah,
we do remember
they were.
We do remember talking with decision makers behind the scenes going into that draft class, where I remember it was made clear to a lot of us that Jaden Daniels was thought of pretty highly, not just in the Vikings building, but league wide.
Yeah, to the point where they probably knew there wasn't going to be much of a chance to get him. And the way he played last year, we saw for good reason that he went number 2 overall. In fact, he probably was better than Caleb Williams last year.
Yeah, it might have been right after that draft. I'm now thinking of when we were informed of that after he went second overall. But
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting draft to do all of that. And obviously we've talked about the Drake May angle of this. Could they have gotten up to get him? And it would have cost a lot to do it. They would have had to pay a very expensive freight to go up and get Drake May. I would imagine Jaden Daniels was probably going to be even more expensive than that. And so I think it was kind of there's not really a chance to get him. I think if they had their pick of anybody in that draft, it would have been Drake May. But yes, I think there was a lot of favorable impression of Jaden Daniels as well. I think they like Caleb Williams a lot too. So, some of those guys you just knew that you weren't going to get. And it was a little bit like this year where they're sitting there with 4 wins, and I think right now they'd be picking 11th, which is exactly where they were in 2024, and that ended up being a 7-win team. But this could be another one of those years where it's not a great year to be bad, because there are a lot of teams sitting there with a win or 2 that are going to be at the top of the draft.
Yeah, and obviously Jaden was amazing last year, as amazing when he's on the field and healthy this year, certainly too. But I think it was his processing when he went to LSU, and it really clicked for him in terms of as a thrower, how he could really open things up from Arizona State to LSU. And that's what decision makers here talked about when they watched him in college and said, when that light turns on, when it clicks for quarterbacks in college, it doesn't turn off. And they felt like they saw something in Daniels that in college could show he could be this in the NFL. So I don't know the rankings of how they had those quarterbacks. I imagine he might have been not as high as May or Williams, but he's probably number 3 at least.
Yeah, I would think. I mean, it would be very interesting to find out that. I mean, we've sort of ascertained where we think they were based on conversations, and we don't have the actual ranking. But I would, if there's ever a chance to see that board, it would be very fascinating to see exactly how they had them stacked.
Yeah, all we know is McCarthy was ahead of Nix.
Yes.
It's just based on where they were drafted.
But Sean Payton tricked everybody. Forget that part of it.
That's right.
Now, Jaden Daniels, this is not the first injury he's dealt with this season.
Yeah.
He also missed a game with a hamstring strain earlier this year. He had another injury at the start of the year that I'm blanking on right now. But he's played in the same number of games that McCarthy has had this season. Now, obviously, Jaden had all last year and had a very good run last year, taking the Commanders to the NFC Championship. But it's interesting looking at some of their struggles. Like Wes Phillips kind of wondered aloud on Tuesday, how different this Commanders team might look if Jaden had been playing the whole time. They're 2-4 with him under center. They're 3-9 overall. Yeah, that sounds right. So
1-5 without him. In other words.
Yes, and without him, it's been Marcus Mariota, who we learned today. I don't know if you guys had known this before, but Kevin O'Connell said that he helped Marcus Mariota during his pre-draft process.
I have learned this year, and when I was working on this project on quarterback development at the beginning of the season, one of my big takeaways from that is Kevin O'Connell's Rolodex of quarterbacks is very long. He's a guy that I've learned over the 4 years covering him. He knows a lot of people, but whether it was working with quarterbacks before the draft, he was involved in the quarterback academy thing that Richmond Flowers, the agent, had set up in the West Coast. Sean McVay was involved in that. Matt LaFleur was involved in that. Kevin O'Connell was involved in that. He's known Drake May and Caleb Williams, for example, since they were like 17 years old. So a lot of these quarterbacks come through the Elite 11 passing academy or passing competition, I guess. You see a lot of NFL quarterbacks. It's like 2/3 or more of current NFL starters have been through that. So when you're in that world like he was back then, where you're helping quarterbacks get ready for the combine, get ready for the draft, especially in that era, he knows a lot of people. And I think probably even coming to the current quarterbacks, because he met Williams and May, who were a class of 24, when they were still in high school. So it didn't surprise me a ton to learn that, because he's been in a lot of these teams that are sort of the blue bloods, I guess, of quarterback development, or they're thought to be in the McVay school of things, the Shanahan school of things, and those are the teams that get a lot of attention and a lot of praise for how they handle quarterbacks, and he's very much from that school. So you get a lot of probably FaceTime with prospects because they want to get to know you and hear what you think and have a chance to learn from you. So yeah, he knows a lot of the quarterbacks that have been taken in the top 5 or 10 in the last decade. And so I think just it was interesting to hear that today, but I thought when I heard it, I was like, okay, yeah, this makes sense.
It was cool to hear what time in his career that came, too, because that was when he had just accepted the job in 2015, that offseason with the Cleveland Browns, gets hired by Mike Pettin to be a quarterback coach in the NFL for the first time. But he had said, I'd already made this commitment to Marcus in his draft process to help him. I got to know him very well, and the Browns let me kind of finish that out. As then he got to coach a young old quarterback by the name of Josh McCown in Cleveland as well.
And Johnny Manziel. That was the quarterback.
Oh my gosh.
There's the young one. Yeah.
And that would be another thing. If we could ever get a candid moment with Josh McCown and Kevin O'Connell, what was that season like? There's a long list of conversations I would love to have that probably I never will.
Yeah.
But that would be an interesting one.
Probably a lot of where's Johnny moments. Where in the world, where in Las Vegas is Johnny Manziel today?
Yeah.
Oh boy. Well, regardless
Johnny
of if
Manziel,
it's
who was number 1 on the Vikings QB board in 2014.
Oh my God.
As we think back to quarterbacks, he was the guy at the top of their list.
What were you doing, Norv?
Yeah, I ended up with Teddy, but yes, just as we bring that name up, an interesting tie-in to the Vikings.
Yeah. Regardless of whether it's Daniels or Mariota, Terry McLaurin is back out there and has been doing good things. I think he had a pretty big game this past weekend. So that's kind of the offensive side. Andrew, you mentioned that this defense is not too much to write about. So what stands out?
It's not very good. No, they were one of the older defenses last year when they had the miraculous year that got them to, was it the NFC title game?
Yes.
Yep.
Where they lost?
Against the Eagles.
Lions in Detroit.
And they looked incredibly old then, and they thought, let's run it back with a lot of the same people, Marcus Lattimore, Bobby Wagner, and the like, and they still are looking,
Wagner.
as Seattle resident here would know, and Emily, he's still doing it, and they're still putting him out there, and like Harrison Smith, it's not looking great at times. So I think this Washington defense is susceptible. It's just the question is, will the simplicity, the newfound or further simplified Viking offense, because this wasn't like a switch overnight, right?
No, it's been pretty simple the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, O'Connell's talked about we have to do this even further. We will continue to do it. And so if this newfound or simpler approach and just telling McCarthy to not worry about your feet and eyes so much, just go out and play, that should at least put them in position to find some rhythm against a Washington defense that gives up a lot of voids in coverage, give up a lot of rushing yards. This was a Washington team that, who did they just play last week? They had, I'm spacing it now.
The Broncos.
Thank you, the Broncos. They had a decent
To
game.
overtime.
It was the Monday night game, wasn't it?
Yeah, they had a decent game against them, but it was more about, I think, the Broncos and Bo Nix beating themselves and not putting that one away. So the Vikings, though, Ben, as we know, are very capable of beating themselves.
They are, and they've done it a lot this year. Certainly did it on Sunday in Seattle. But you're facing an old defense on a short week coming off a Monday night game in overtime. Like, that's as favorable a situation as they're probably going to have the rest of this year. So
I think it was the Sunday night game. Because wasn't Monday the Patriots?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So short-ish week, I
Yeah.
guess. It's not. I mean, it's not a 6-day turnaround, but it is a night game and it's an overtime game. So you have, and against a tough defense in the Broncos, which have one of the better defenses in the NFL. So it is as good of a get-right game opportunity as they're going to have, I think. I mean, maybe the Giants when they go out there, but being at home against this defense and the run it back conversation to me is always fascinating because they did it with a young quarterback. They probably have every reason to think let's keep building with this thing, but the idea of do you keep your old defensive players? I mean, the Vikings ran into this in 22, and they decided, no to Eric Kendricks in 23, no to Adam Thielen in 23, no to Dalvin Cook. The process of saying, do we hang on, is always – every team faces this at different points, and it's fascinating to see where this goes. Obviously, for the Commanders, it has not worked. So, yeah, that defense at home – I would think is as good a chance as the Vikings are going to have to put some things together.
Yeah, one of the only guys they decided to move on from in the offseason was Jonathan Allen.
Yeah.
Who the Vikings ended up with, and it hasn't looked exactly great for them yet. So, but there were still plenty of pieces on that Washington defense that can get taken advantage of if the quarterback is able to do it.
Yeah, we will see how the Vikings do against the Commanders on Sunday. Before then, we will be wrapping up the week on Friday. We will be answering any questions that you have. You can send those to accessvikings@startribune.com or send them to any of us on social media. And in case you need your spirits lifted, our Vikings Flashback Friday this week is the Minneapolis Miracle. Though I posted on my Instagram story and someone slid in and said the joy of this game only overshadowed by the disappointment of the next. So
sure,
shout out Cameron.
I got an email this week to accessvikings@startribune.com. Said, hey, I love the show. Talked about he appreciates the fact that we do all this with a little bit of levity and perspective, which is something we try to do even in the middle of a tough season. But he said, one note for you guys. Can you stop the Flashback Friday being all the clunker games where they've lost so many times? It's like some of these things come back up because you and I go back to all of these moments where it's like this butterfly effect of this game had this current effect on the team, like the 7th-set game and Kirk and all this kind of stuff. But for those who want their spirits lifted, there's probably no better way to do it than Diggs sideline touchdown, unbelievable, Vikings win it. So your questions, your prayers have been answered. Stefon Diggs will be here Friday to make all of you feel better.
We did the 2022 Buffalo win, didn't we?
We did.
That was on there.
So that's been in there.
There's been some comeback wins on there. There has been some clunkers on there as well.
We did the Lions game with Cam Dantzler and Jared Goff. We did the 7.
Important parts of Vikings lore.
They are important. So this one also is important, and we are giving it. We'd like to be as balanced and comprehensive as we can. So we will have some good memories from that game, some good stories to tell, I would think.
For sure, and I have some fun observations already. I'm already through the first half. So we will talk about all of that on Friday. Thank you for listening.
They're up 17 ripped.
I know. First half is easy. It's like the best first half I feel like I've watched in this series. But
no problem.
we will talk to you Friday.